Good morning, wherever you are. This is Miles Carter from ConferenceHype. Our segment will focus on a human sting-specific macrocyclic peptide suppresses CGAS sting-induced inflammation. From the 2026 May edition of Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases. Suppression of hyperactive stimulator of interferon genes may provide therapeutic benefits to treat inflammatory diseases. We identified a macrocyclic peptide, named P1, which binds to human sting by a new platform for the discovery of pseudo-natural macrocyclic peptides. In cellular experiments, P1 effectively blocked the translocation of HSDING from endoplasmic reticulum to the trans-Golgi network, increasing the accumulation of HSDING on ER, and thus interrupted the downstream sting signaling transduction, which resulted in reduced production of interferon beta and pro-inflammatory cytokines, the major effectors of the sting pathway. From the 2026 July 23 edition of Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases. Background: this study aimed to identify plasma biomarkers associated with systemic sclerosis-related interstitial lung disease and progressive pulmonary fibrosis using an unbiased protomic approach, and to assess their predictive value across independent cohorts. Methods: plasma from 202 patients with SSC was analyzed, including a discovery cohort and a replication cohort from 3 centers. Results: a total of 1507 proteins were quantified, of which 44 and 51 were associated with SSC-ILD and SSC-PPF, respectively. Discussion: SBD and MMP8 emerge as candidate biomarkers for diagnosing SSC-ILD and predicting SSC-PPF, respectively. From the 2026 May edition of Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases. Background: Sjogren's disease is a systemic autoimmune disorder characterized by dysfunction of exocrine glands, particularly the salivary and lacrimal glands, with no clear etiology or effective therapy. Methods: utilizing single-cell and spatial transcriptomics alongside spatial immunophenotyping to analyze human minor salivary glands. We developed a comprehensive understanding of the cellular landscape of non-SJD salivary glands and how that landscape changes in SJD patients. Results: we identified previously unrecognized heterogeneity among acinar cells, including a PRR4 plus CSD3 plus WFDC2- Seramucus acinar population that is selectively lost in Sjogren's disease. Discussion: using single-cell and spatial transcriptomics and proteomics, this study identifies a selective loss of PRR4 plus CSD3 plus WFDC2- Seramucus acinar cells and a rise in GZMK plus CD8 plus T cells in Sjogren's disease, revealing distinct immune-mediated epithelial remodeling and interferon-driven dysfunction across diverse clinical presentations. From the 2026 July 24 edition of Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases. Background: rheumatoid arthritis exhibits clinical and biological heterogeneity, with synovial tissue stratified into histological pathotypes, lymphomyeloid, diffuse myeloid, and pauciimmune fibroid. Methods: synovial RNA sequencing of patients with early Rha was used for differential gene expression between pathotypes, and pathway enrichment analyses were performed using GWAS-identified susceptibility genes for Rha, osteoarthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, psoriatic arthritis, and systemic lupus erythematosus. Results: Rha susceptibility gene expression in synovial tissue separated patients by pathotype and correlated with markers of disease activity. Discussion: expression of Rha susceptibility genes is not evenly distributed across synovial pathotypes, but is strongly biased towards the lymphomyeloid pathotype, indicating that current GWAS signals preferentially capture immune-driven disease mechanisms.
This is Conference Hype. Stay with us, coverage continues.
From the 2026 July 23 edition of Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases. Background: Autologous anti-CD19 chimeric antigen receptor T-cell therapy shows promise for refractory systemic lupus erythematosus, but its impact on central nervous system immune remodeling and the cellular features associated with CAR-T-associated neurotoxicity remains unclear. Methods: we performed integrated single-cell RNA T-cell receptor sequencing and Olink proteomics on cerebrospinal fluid from patients with SLE treated longitudinally with CAR-T therapy, plus independent baseline single-cell RNA sequencing and Olink samples. Results: single-cell profiling of 47,222 CSF cells showed dynamic CNS immune composition following CAR-T therapy, with notable changes in T cells. Discussion: these findings suggest an association between CAR-T therapy and CNS immune remodeling in SLE, and provide cellular and molecular observations that may inform future studies of CNS immunity. From the 2026 May edition of Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases. Background: kappa B alpha controls the canonical activation of NF-kappa B. Methods: variants in NF-kBIA were identified using whole exome sequencing. Results: the p-GLN 228 variant in NF-kBIA, identified in a family with a history of arthritis and psoriasis, did not affect induced degradation of kappa B alpha. Discussion: NF-kBIA variants not localizing to the signal reception domain can affect kappa B alpha function and consequently restrict the canonical activation of NF-kappa B. From the 2026 July 25 edition of Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases. Recommendations and points to consider are important tools to improve the quality of care for people living with rheumatic and musculoskeletal diseases. An important requirement of the European Alliance of Associations for Rheumatology Recommendations and PTCS is that they resonate with clinical experience and are practical, easy to understand, and actionable. At the same time, they should commit to the 3 pillars of evidence-based medicine: best available research evidence, clinical expertise, and patient values and preferences, and to good clinical practice, and they should include a responsible level of cost consciousness. The target audience for recommendations and PTCS consists of people living with RMDs, health professionals in rheumatology, rheumatologists, RMD researchers, and national and international policy and decision-makers worldwide. This article describes the structure and key principles of the EULAR standard operating procedures to develop recommendations and PTCS. From the 2026 May edition of Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases. Background: glucocorticoids effectively treat many diseases, but toxicity limits their utility. Methods: in sequential cohorts, adults with polymyalgia rheumatica received prednisolone 10 mg/d with placebo for 2 weeks, then clofutridine with either prednisolone 10, 15, 20, or 30 mg/d for 2 weeks. Results: 49 and 47 participants completed each trial period with evaluable data. Discussion: further trials to assess clofutridine's potential to improve the benefit-risk profile of prednisolone are warranted.
This is ConferenceHype. Stay with us, coverage continues.
ConferenceHype is interactive AI commentary only. It is not reporting, journalism, medical education, clinical guidance, scientific validation, legal advice, or financial advice. ConferenceHype is independent and is not affiliated with conference organizers, presenters, sponsors, or exhibitors. From the 2026 July 23 edition of Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases. Background: autoantibody internalization has been implicated in autoimmune disease pathogenesis, yet its mechanisms and generalizability across diseases, cell types, and tissues remain poorly defined. Methods: bulk RNA sequencing was performed on 814 muscle biopsies from patients with autoimmune diseases and healthy controls, including an external validation cohort of 41 additional samples. Results: using anti-Me2 dermatomyositis and anti-PM/SCL scleromyositis as model diseases, we validated reproducible, autoantibody-specific transcriptomic signatures consistent with autoantigen dysfunction across cohorts, and confirmed that electroporation of purified patient IgG into healthy primary cells recapitulates these disease-associated transcriptional programs. Discussion: together, these findings establish autoantibody internalization as a mechanism of tissue injury and autoimmunity, suggesting its broader relevance across autoantibody-mediated diseases. From the 2026 July 21 edition of Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases. Background: this study aimed to update the European Alliance of Associations for Rheumatology recommendations for management of polymyalgia rheumatica, giant cell arteritis, and Takayasu arteritis. Methods: following EULAR standard operating procedures, systematic literature reviews identified data published since the previous versions for PMR and for GCA-TAK. Results: the task force agreed on 4 overarching principles, 12 recommendations, and 2 quality indicators. Discussion: updated guidance on management of PMR and large vessel vasculitis is provided in a single set of practical recommendations and algorithms. From the 2026 May edition of Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases. Background: the presence of immunoglobulin autoantibodies has been described in many autoimmune diseases, and some of its characteristics, such as IgA dimerization, are considered a sign of a mucosal origin. Methods: plasma of patients with rheumatic disease, rheumatoid arthritis, systemic sclerosis, anti-neutrophil cytoplasmic antibody-associated vasculitis, systemic lupus erythematosus. SARS-CoV-2 vaccinated healthy individuals, and healthy controls was used for size exclusion chromatography. Results: the proportion of dimeric IgA was increased for autoantibodies compared to total IgA. Discussion: these findings indicate that dimeric IgA responses are associated with newly emerging antigen-specific immune activation, where production temporarily shifts to dimeric IgA. From the 2026 July 21 edition of Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases. Background: the objective of the article is to assess the efficacy and safety of rilzabrutinib, an oral reversible inhibitor of Bruton's tyrosine kinase, in participants with IgG4-related disease. Methods: this Phase 2A open-label, 52-week study enrolled 2 cohorts of participants with IgG4-related disease, Cohort A and Cohort B. Results: this study included 27 participants. Discussion: rilzabrutinib had an acceptable safety profile in patients with IgG4-related disease who had failed intolerant to rituximab and who were rituximab naive. This is ConferenceHype. Stay with us, coverage continues. That's it for now for Conference Hype's coverage of the July 2026 issue of Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases. If anything was missed, tell us which article deserves follow-up. Tag us on X. Add your perspective in the comments, share this review with your clinical team, like the video, and subscribe with notifications turned on for the next journal broadcast.